Welcome back to another episode of the Goodman Podcast, where we are exploring the ever evolving world of technology. In this episode, we're diving headfirst into the realm of Edge AI and IoT integration. Now, these terms might sound quite intimidating if you're not familiar with AI, but don't worry. Raj is going to be breaking it down into bite sized pieces and helping us understand how these technologies are working together to change the way we interact with the world around us. So, like always, Raj, I think probably the best place to kick off is to have you explain in simple terms what Edge AI and IoT actually mean and how they're currently being used in our daily lives.
Sure thing, Megan. Good to see you again, and good to
Yeah.
be back on the Goodman podcast. But yeah, I wonder why AI marketeers like to have these difficult names for something very simple. I mean, why can't just have LLMs, a large language model, like long acronyms, and why can't they just make a simple one for doing something simpler? But anyway, and let's dive into it, as you mentioned earlier, about what is Edge AI versus IoT. So Edge AI is basically a concept where you can put in small language models in the constraint of a local environment without having it to talk to the internet. So let me break it down a bit further. We know about tools like ChatGPT, Anthropic, different language models like Llama. These are all considered to be large language models. They require the internet to use them. It's because they have to be stored somewhere in a big enough server space capacity with GPUs to run them, because they are humongous in size. They can take care of multiple requirements. But imagine a case where you're not linked to the internet. You're somewhere remote, for example. Say you're on a farm, for instance. Or if you want something which is a bit more smaller and nimble, doesn't require internet every time, use it. That's where Edge AI comes in. Edge AI allows us the ability to have AI within the constraints of a localized environment. Could be in our spectacles, for example. Could be in the case of a farm where you have a agricultural tool, for example. Maybe remote in a remote part for healthcare, for instance. The aim really is to make life easier by having single purpose or restrained language models which are available in constrained environments. So you don't have to go to the internet to use them. They are fully operational locally itself on your device or within your tool.
So, kind of like if you're on an airplane on an international flight and you don't want to pay for the Wi-Fi connection, you can still use your device in airplane mode and connect to these large language models if you've obviously got the app and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just saw a video of yesterday of Facebook working with Ray-Ban, and from what I'm hearing is that Ray-Bans, which are the sunglass company, have used Meta, which is ex-Facebook, Meta's models to be able to read content for you and give what it knows about it. So without having for it to connect to the internet and read to the heaps of data, you can use it. And the same thing can be used, for example, I saw one more video of I don't know what that is called in agricultural terms, but it's sort of it's a weed remover. So if it goes through, there's a camera in it, and it kind of hovers around. It's basically like a drone, and it has a bit where no one identifies there's weed within the crops, it'll just burn it out, just like police fire. It's like, it's literally like it's a little scary. I'm be honest with you. If it can be used for wrong purposes as well, but in the purpose of weed removal in the farms seemed ideal. So that's completely in the drone itself, the link to the internet. It has been trained to just do one job properly. That's just to remove weed based on the images it's been given. So it's been trained on only images around weed. It's not been trained on, for example, planets or what computers is. It only knows one thing. and does it really well. Doesn't require the internet and can be stored in a localized space enough to kind of do this job well.
Yeah, yeah. Now, that kind of leads into my next question, because you obviously mentioned operating in remote locations with limited internet. And this is obviously a real world example. But are there other examples that you can give of devices that are already kind of thriving off the grid, and what kind of impact this is having in the real world?
Absolutely. I believe there is a space and place for localized edge AI, and there's case for large language models connected to the internet. Typically, that's also called IoT as well, Internet of Things, where you have smart devices. For example, when you say "Hey Google," and Google reacts to it, or you have a camera, just like looking at your home security and making sure things are fine, and rings an alarm and there's a burglar coming in. These are all IoT examples. These are all things which are linked to the internet. There's a place for that, but there also is a requirement for scenarios where you don't need to link to the internet every time you need it. For example, in the case of medical devices, imagine you're in the middle of operation and you lose internet. You can't just leave the patient high and dry on the operating theater. You have to still do the surgery. And so for those cases, having the power, the AI all built into it, it's a much better and a much safer way to operate a person, as opposed to having it linked to the internet every time, and when internet goes down, all hell breaks loose. So there is a case for large language models. For example, in the case of home security, if the internet goes off for a few seconds, it's not the end of the world. But in some cases where the internet, if it goes away, it can cause a life or death situation. You want to avoid that. And so there's a case to kind of build a edge AI, the device itself, so it can do its job well, and can also fall back to the internet if it requires to, for a more advanced level of operations or skills.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I read somewhere recently that in terms of like medical tech, for example, they have had some success in implanting, tech devices in somebody's spine and enabling them to walk again. And the whole thing was kind of worked on Wi-Fi that connected the brain to this thing in the person's spine. Now, obviously, that would be catastrophic for there to be kind of a loss or a failure in that tech, because the person would fall down or potentially hurt themselves, or now taking a step back, as somebody that's running an online business, we often encounter frustrating instances of tech failing when the internet goes down. So you can't necessarily compare that to somebody who's walking again and the connection fails, versus like now in South Africa we've got load shedding, for example, and so batteries running Wi-Fi towers and that kind of thing sometimes fail because of the lack of electricity. But the failure of technology, if the internet goes down, I mean, it's got very vast, wide ranging consequences for individuals and businesses and society as large. So how does Edge AI empower devices to be more reliable and independent, especially in unpredictable situations? I mean, you don't really know when your internet connection could go down. So Edge really kind of provides like a fail-safe for that, doesn't it?
It does. It does. As I was mentioning earlier, with Edge AI, the device is independent of relying on internet. It potentially can rely on internet for much bigger, unusual, or very customized, bespoke roles or jobs. The majority of the function is within the device or the tool itself. And that allows it to be a full, complete device. The thing is, over the last few years, we got so reliant on using devices to link to the internet. Best example would be telephone. Telephone at one point had no internet, but I can't imagine a time that my smartphone doesn't have any internet to it. Like that would be like, what's the point of having a phone that doesn't have internet to it, in it? It's like that doesn't work for me at all.
Yeah.
But there was a time when you use phones for actually making phone calls, and then came text, and then came emails to BlackBerry, and then now internet, right? But there is still a role and a case for very important or remote devices used remote in remote situations where we need to not rely on internet for our connectivity. They can be linked to the internet to update them, to cause them to kind of to reboot and then kind of refresh them, but they operate independent of the internet, and that allows them to be safer and complete device on its own. And with the power supply now being battery being better, lighter, the advent of solar power, for example, coming in, and who knows what happens with nuclear energy and everything else, we should be able to have devices which are standalone, and that will really help us to have a better backup options and more secure options as well.
Yeah. Now, on that point about data security, obviously, protection of personal information is a growing concern for everyone. Having your data stored locally as opposed to being sent to a cloud in order to get, like asking an Edge AI on your local device versus asking Google, there's you're not sending your personal information over the internet. Maybe you could go into other impact, the other impact that this might have. I mean, we've got marketing, for example. I know we're kind of moving into a cookieless environment, but this kind of thing is going to prevent cookies from tracking you over the internet, and marketers being able to collate data on you to push ads and that kind of thing. So I don't know if that is necessarily the biggest issue surrounding data privacy, but maybe you can just walk us through that a little bit as well.
Well, before we go into data privacy, I think the bigger issue is, for example, say you're in the hospital environment and everything is linked to, let's just for now, just imagine OpenAI. They have a smart bed, they have a smart, meter for measure the heart and other vital organs. They have all these other things linked to OpenAI or any large language model. And suddenly they realize that, well, this IP address is causing like spam or challenges with with our system, and they block the entire IP. Suddenly, all devices in the internet in the hospital stop working. That can cause a humongous challenge, especially if it's an error. And we can't have that in especially in hospitals or other critical care situations. That for me is a big challenge, and that's a big case where we should actually have Edge AI, which is a fully remote relevant working condition for these. In my opinion, we go in cycles. In cycles, what I mean is there was a time when we bought devices, we bought products just standalone. You bought a CD with the software and you were done. And nowadays we're like, no, CDs are bad. Who wants DVDs and CDs? We will get a subscription on the internet, and we will like buy the product, and we'll get updates all the time, and it's all on the internet. Now we're going back to where we came from, whereby we're building standalone products. And it's possible now because every big company like Llama by Meta, like OpenAI doing the Chat GPT, they're building or looking to build a smaller installment or installation of large language models, which are called Edge AI. And I think it was really interesting, and it will keep evolving because we need that. Also, just to add to what we said earlier about implanting things in people's spine or brain, Elon Musk recently is announced about implanting chips within the brain, and I think that's going to be really interesting. I was just thinking about. I did a video yesterday about the implication of AI in our lives. I'll demonstrate with an example. My wife and I went for a date afternoon, not date evening, a date afternoon. And civilized people went to have tea. We went to a place called TWG, which is a Singaporean brand. And I think they had 100 different types of teas on the menu.
Jeez, yeah.
And you're like, how the hell will I choose one tea which I like? You ask the waiter for their recommendation, they give like non-customized, most expensive items on the menu. So what did I do? Took a picture of all the entire menu, asked it to ChatGPT and said, "This is my interest. What should I drink?" And give me 3 customized options. One of them was basically a tea which tastes like it has milk in it, but it has no milk whatsoever, no lactose whatsoever. So I'm lactose intolerant, and I can't have milk in my tea. This is like it tastes creamy by default. And like, well, I've come to have expensive tea. I might as well have one of those than have a bog standard sort of Earl Grey or green tea. So I think when you have that ability in our brain, for example, or potentially in the Apple Vision Pro, where we look at stuff and we can know that, okay, this path or this restaurant, order this, or this path will take the fastest route to my destination, or this car will get me there quicker, or this is a danger area. Makes us much more smarter and more prepared for life. I think that is where AI will really impact our lives, and all this is possible through large language models, but also with smaller language models, we should be able to achieve that as well. And I think this is a very interesting space, which is very promising alongside all the other areas of AI coming up in this space.
Yeah. So now that's obviously we're looking at the future. You mentioned the Apple AR thing, the goggles.
Vision Pro.
I know. Google was also developing something similar. So is that where it's going? Is it going to become like this human AI interface? Are we going to end up interacting with the real world through an AI assistant?
I believe strongly that's inevitable. That there is going to be no other way apart from hardware, which is AI powered, assisting us across, whether it's to people who are perhaps visually impaired, for them to see, people who are not able to potentially walk or run to be able to do that better, to make our lives easier. This is the beginning. This is the beginning of total automation in our life. And this will continue. I don't think it's going to ever stop. And this is why, when we think about why Elon Musk can't sleep, because he's thinking about the future of humanity with AI, is because the reality is he understands that we are jumping into this very quickly. And it's possible now. Already we can see that Apple launches this Vision Pro, and there's no clear app yet for the Vision Pro. The people are debating what that might be. Well, the Apple also announced they're going to launch the AI mid this year to 2024. That's it. When they launch that and they have this, it's going to give them the ability to really make much smarter decisions for human beings in the back of this, because it's all that it does is like it's augmenting different things for us. Now it augments with intelligence to it. That's the no-brainer.
That's amazing. Very, very exciting, interesting times ahead, I think. So that was essentially a whirlwind tour of Edge AI and IoT integration. Thanks, Raj, for helping us navigate this very complex topic in a way that we can all understand. To the listeners and watchers, geez, my English has checked out for today. To the listeners and viewers, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And thanks again, Raj. Until next time, let's keep our ear to the ground and see what new stuff is coming up.
Thank you, Megan.